Let's look at some things that are different about the Indiana Pacers so far this season. Their three-point attempt rate, some lineup numbers that are crazy, and we will talk about the game tonight against the New Orleans Pelicans, all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. Congrats, you made it through the week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name is Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today I look very silly in my Halloween attire. I have my Toon Squad jersey on and my Bugs Bunny ears on, so congrats to the YouTube people who get to see that the entire time, and we have much to discuss in the land of the Pacers. I want to talk about some stuff that's different. I talked about pace already a little bit. I want to talk about other stuff that has noticeably been different to me in a way that either is just worth keeping an eye on as a trend or is something that might merit change. Both the lineup stuff for the Pacers and three-point attempt rate stuff for the Pacers. Before we talk about the Pelicans, I know I said I wouldn't get too stat nerdy, mostly because a lot of stuff is variance, but a way a team plays, which is more specific what we're diving into today, can be more revealing. That actually is one of the preseason stats that really over the top stat people keep an eye on, is like a way a team plays versus how a team plays. And I'll get into some of that stuff with the Pacers. Also very upset that tonight's game is not Pacers Bucks, so I don't get to say what's up, Doc, a million times and act like I'm referring to the Bucks coach. Let's start with threes for the Pacers. I don't want this to get into like they should take a 50 threes a game kind of thing, because I don't know that any team except maybe Boston has the personnel for that kind of volume. But here's what I will say. I asked Rick Carlisle about this before the Celtics game, because a quick glance at the Pacers game log for the current season shows they have not been getting up threes like at all this year, right? I think they're, to this moment, the moment I'm speaking right now, the most they've gotten up in regulation is 31. They got up 31 in regulation against Boston, and then took 7 in the overtime period, and they took 31 in regulation against Detroit. I think they took more than 31 in both the Philly and Boston games by the end, but they had overtime to get there. And that's relevant to me because last year the Pacers averaged 35 threes per game, and they haven't even hit that in regulation a single time through 5 games. So that made me go, that doesn't seem right. Like they have Tyrese Haliburton, who's this great shooter. He can create threes for others. Now, I will say, obviously, they now have Siakam. They no longer have Buddy Hield. There is some trade-off there, but they had Bruce Brown, who's not really this kind of shooter early in the season. There's just a lot of dynamics that made this really interesting to me. And I asked Rick about it, and he said, no, they want to take more. You know, there is a right number, I think, for every team. And I don't know what the Pacers is. I certainly think it's higher than what that we've seen from them this season. Again, as I'm talking right now, they're 24th in the league with 32 three-point attempts per game. But to be clear, that's a per game number, which means it bakes in the threes they took in overtime of 2 of their 5 games. You subtract those out, they'd be in the bottom 5, most likely, in attempts per game, which I think is interesting. And so when I asked Rick that question, I had just kind of stumbled upon this and was thinking about it. And I hadn't gone farther than that. I hadn't gone to what are they taking instead, right? What are the shot attempts the Pacers are taking instead? And are they taking the same percentage of their shots as threes and they're just shooting less? Because that is also something relevant to note this year for the Pacers. Their total shot attempt numbers are down, but that's because their free throws are up, right? They're taking right now about 6 more free throws per game than last year. Shout out to the air quotes more physical NBA. But that means they're taking less shots per game because those are translated to fouls, going to the foul line, etc. Right? So there is some trade-off in the per game total numbers that I'm willing to accept. But what I went farther on is let's look at the three-point attempt rate and see if that's down. And if it is, what is the trade? And why is that what the Pacers are trying to identify as better or worse this season, right? So last year, the Pacers, second best offense in NBA history behind only the Celtics of last year also, took 38% of their shots from 3 over the course of the season. Pretty healthy number. I think 40 could work for them. I think 37 could work for them, just whatever. But 38. This year, 36.2% of their shots have been 3 so far. That's not that big of a change, right? I mean, is it really worth diving in on 2% of your shots, which over the course of an entire game for the Pacers is probably about 2 shot attempts? Maybe, but for a team that has they're 1 point away from a win against Philly. If they had one more point in regulation, they're, right. The whole game changes if they have 1 or 2 more points against Orlando. Like, these margins can matter. But let's go further on this, because I don't think saying, oh, there's a 2% difference in their 3-point attempt rate is the end of the conversation. Because if, and I think I'm giving away where I'm getting with my conclusion in a second by saying if they were taking fewer threes, but they were taking a bunch more shots at the rim, that's a fine trade-off. You love rim shots. That's probably the thing that NBA teams want most, despite this public conception that it's all threes. Teams want shots at the rim, right? That's what they are hunting all the time. So maybe that's what it is. Let's look into this for the Pacers. Are they just instead trading off threes for shots at the basket? No, that's still wrong. Last year, Pacers, 25.9% of their shots from 3 feet or less. This year, 24.2. So these are small differences, right? You might be saying, why are you getting in on all this? Because their 3-point rate difference from last year to this year, 1.8% in the negative direction, right? Their 0 to 3 feet right at the basket shot percentage down 1.7%. So that's 3.5% of their shots that have come away from the most efficient shots on the floor. Is that really a big deal? Am I making too much out of nothing? Let's keep going. And then you can decide, or you can say, what are you talking about? 3 to 10 feet. The next best spot to shoot from. A 4-footer is a great shot, even though it doesn't count as right at the rim on Basketball Reference shot tracking. Last year, the Pacers, 3 to 10 feet, 22% of their shots. This year, 19.2. You have now officially reached the conclusion of this very long opening monologue I have made about the first 5 games of the Pacers season. That's a 2.8% difference. Now we have reached 6 or 7%, basically, of the Pacers shots that have transferred out of the most efficient areas to shoot from, in the paint, at the rim, from 3. And instead have shifted to mid-range shots and long twos. So from the air quotes mid-range, 10 feet to 16 feet, a lot of guys are very passable and efficient from that range. In fact, we'll get to that in just a second. This year, they're taking 9.4% of their shots from there. This year they're taking 13.3%, of their shots from there. Last year it was 9.4. That's a 3.9% growth, like 3 or 4 shots per game from that distance. And then long twos, 16 feet out to the 3-point line. Last year, 4.7% of the Pacers shots were from that range. This year, that number is 7%. So most of their change in shots has shifted from threes, rim, and paint to that, mid-range and long twos. Is that actually bad? Maybe, probably. In fact, I would argue that no team wants that right now. Even if they have the best, even if you had a roster of the 10 best mid-range scorers in the league, they would be trying to get open threes and layups and shots in the paint every possession, literally every single one, right? That's like it's an endless goal of teams to be getting more efficient offense. So this trade-off made me wonder, why is this the case, right? Did I already say it? Is it that they don't have 50 games of Buddy Hield, and they now have 41 more games of Siakam, and Siakam's good enough from mid-range that trade-off exists, but it keeps your offense afloat or at the same level it was last year, which we saw the Pacers did in the 41 games he was on the team. Is that it? Is there something more to this? Well, oh boy, if only we could look under that hood and decide that too. Because it's very easy to look at the team and see who specifically is taking the shots from those distances, right? And only 3 guys on the Pacers are taking more than 13% of their shots from 10 to 16 feet from mid-range. TJ McConnell, yep, we see that all the time. He's quite good at them. Pascal Siakam, we see that all the time. He's quite good at them. And the third one's Andrew Nembhard. And I already heard people roll their eyes or go, why him? That's the guy that's got to shift for him. But last year, like, that's his shot to me. Like, Andrew Nembhard, one step inside the elbow is his shot. Last year, Andrew Nembhard from 10 to 16 feet was I for some reason can't read right now. Yeah, last year from that range, 53.4%. That's almost one. That's great efficiency. And then on long twos, he was at 48.8%. Like, you are happy with those on twos. Like, you're okay with that. You're not like seeking it out, but that's like a good shot, right? And so you live with him there, you live with Siakam there, you live with McConnell there, and then long twos, the only guys over 7.5% are Nembhard and Mathurin. And Mathurin, that one surprised me a bit. And 2 of those were the foot on the line shots he took late against Detroit that were basically threes, because he has never really been a long twos guy, right? If you go back through his career, 4.5% his rookie year, 6% last year, 15.6% this year. So what do we actually take away from this? I think one thing to take away from this is it's been 5 games and small sample sizes, like Ben Mathurin having his foot on the line 2 times actually plays kind of a factor in where this shakes out. Thing 2 is Tyrese Haliburton also taking a little bit more long twos, by the way. Thing 2 is this might be a shift that is just a part of the transition from what they were at the start of last year to who they are now, which is Pascal, Siakam on the team, Andrew Nembhard being very comfortable from those spots, those kind of things. Because without Hield, even like Jordan Nwora, right? Like guys they had last year were shooters and could shoot all the time, are now not on the team. Bruce Brown wasn't a shooter, but like his 3-point attempt rate was at least healthy with the Pacers, are gone. And they've been replaced by Siakam, who is more inside the arc, although he went 6 for 8 from 3 in the very most recent Pacers game. So that trade-off is fine. He's efficient from those spots. So maybe the answer is they're going to be a team that accepts this trade-off ever so slightly. But I would say that the conclusion of this should be that their offense has looked kind of clunky for some portions of the season. They should be trying to shift back to at least close to, even with different personnel, as close to what they had last year as they can get. Because they have guys who can score from all over the floor. That's very valuable, right? But I think that what we've seen from the Pacers, especially on nights where their 3 has just completely sunk them, is that like they shot 70% from 2 against the Knicks and lost that game by 25 points. Like they need to be hunting 10 feet in somehow. And I think this speaks to what looked different-ish about them besides their lack of pace around the season was there was less rim pressure in the way they'd play. They couldn't get as far with their penetration to set up the right shots, to set up the right plays, to get defenses in rotation, and it was noticeable. So to me, my takeaway from all this is Pacers need to drive. They need to be putting pressure on the paint and the rim as much as possible, and that will lead to more rim attempts, more threes, more Pacers-y shot diet, because 6%, again, a 6% shift in total shots from the most efficient spots to the least efficient doesn't sound like much, but that point per shot difference with 6 or 7 shots in a game really matters. And they've played 4 out of 5 games that have been tight down to the wire games where the smallest margins, like free throws, like clutch play, have mattered so much. If you can create a tinier advantage, you should do it. And so I wanted to dig into that. That seems like a small play style difference from last year and talk about how the Pacers can do it differently. Speaking of different from last year, the starting 5, we need to talk about it. Yikes on the numbers. Is it actually concerning? Should you be concerned? Do they need to change it? Let's talk about that coming up here on Locked On Pacers. Before we get to that, we have to talk about the great people over at FanDuel. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, like the game we saw last night, Jets-Texans. Colts division foe gets a loss because right now, new customers can bet $5 on FanDuel and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. How about that? The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on NBA, NFL, whatever, all in one place because it happens to everybody. You get that hunch in the middle of a game. You know what's coming. You know who's about to get hot. You just see it coming. Well, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play, and you can see so much more all in the same place where you would place those bets on FanDuel. Be as informed as you can to act on your hunches. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is on FanDuel.com. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Space Jam. Just kidding. Wish that was real. That'd be fun. Locked On Grizzlies, because I was watching Grizzlies Bucks earlier to mostly watch the Bucks, but also watch the Grizzlies. And Ja Morant had like the coolest 5-possession run for a player I've ever seen. I don't want to talk about the Grizzlies too much here, but he had like a behind-the-back rebound that he did out of function, not out of flash, and a pass from his butt, and a sweet fake pass, and a sweet pass. It was awesome. The Grizzlies ran the Bucks out of the building. Listen to Locked On Grizzlies and Locked On Bucks, because the Bucks, yikes. Yikes. That's all I will say. Okay, let's keep it rolling in Pacerland. A lot of discussion about lineups, especially after Mathurin's awesome game off the bench. And I was asked about it by Jimmy Cook, my man, on 107.5 The Fans Midday Show earlier in the day, and it got me thinking, and I wanted to look at numbers because that's what I do. I can also just feel this because I watch the games. The starters this year: Nembhard, Nesmith, Haliburton, Siakam, Turner. 4 games, 68 minutes, minus 9.4 net rating. Let me start by saying this, something I just said about the shot diet too. These sample sizes are incredibly small. It will take one game to flip a lot of these numbers on their head. Play style, though, is at least somewhat more reflective. And this is a sort of style change. Not really. Lineups are a little different because the rotation's just different in general. But I want to dive into this. Why is that the case? Why do the Pacers have a minus 9.4 net rating for their starters this year? Where last year, that exact same group, 444 minutes together, that's a lot, was awesome. Plus 6.4. This is NBA.com's number, so a little bit of estimation, but it's easier to see all the lineups in one place. Well, last year, their offense was good, and their defense was kind of pedestrian. And this year, their defense has been kind of pedestrian, acceptable, I would say, 113.8 defensive rating. And their offense has sucked, has completely stunk for that group. 104.4 offensive rating for that starting five per NBA.com's estimated numbers. I could pull up something more specific. Their exact true shooting percentage is barely above league average for a lineup that is supposed to be your best five players, or at least a unit that you can play for a long time and have an advantage over your opponent. That's not good enough. That's just not good enough. Now, let me stop you there and say, I, data guy, and you, I hope, person who have watched lots of sports, would rather use 82 games or whatever it was, Siakam trade, 41 games of data to assess something than 5, obviously, but there's shifting dynamics of a season, which is why we're having this discussion in the first place. I've also said this many times. I don't think you even need to think about lineup changes until 15, 20 games in. I don't want to get to that yet. I will talk about what could potentially be happening. Last year, the Pacers' first lineup change was that like Thanksgiving-ish. They played the Hawks. Remember that? And Obi Toppin came off the bench and Buddy Hield came off the bench and they scored 150 points. Then they went right back to that and they didn't make a change until about Christmas time, right? That seems like a similar timeline again. That was 2 years ago too when Jalen Smith got pulled from the starting 4 spot. Was about Christmas time, right? That seems like the Pacers' assessment timeline. Anyway, I don't think the starting 5 is as bad as the numbers say. Let's start there because we have eons of data saying that they're better than that, right? When Haliburton gets going a little bit, when Nembhard and Nesmith, who've both been kind of up and down this year, get going a little bit, that group will look better. We know those players are more effective than their stats show from years of time. That said, that group has looked better in various combinations featuring another player. Obviously, everybody's going to want, and I will, talk about Ben Mathurin in this. But I think a lot of your conclusions are different than what the numbers say. Ben Mathurin has fit in very well with the starters, but not in the place of the player that everybody has been talking about. The lineup with Mathurin that has crushed is actually Haliburton, Nembhard, Mathurin, Siakam, Turner. I keep seeing people say he should play instead of Andrew Nembhard. I guess he's been killing it in Nesmith's spot mostly with the starters this year. And that's also fine, to be clear. It's not like one or the other matters. I just think people need that perspective. That group has been defending like crazy, which really matters. For those of you who are pro Nembhard starting or want him to play, my argument for why that hasn't been the case is that Nesmith and Nembhard are the best defenders on the perimeter the team has, and that's why they play between Haliburton and the other stars. If Mathurin's, defense reaches that level or close enough to it that his offense, which is better than theirs, offsets that, he would start. And he did defend very well in the second half against Boston after 2 early slip-ups, and of course also paired that with 30 and 11, right? Like that's the game where you go, yes, duh, this guy should be in that group. But for who is a question, and do they really need to do it now when if their starting 5 bounces back and they can just play Mathurin the right 25 to 30 minutes off the bench with the right groups, maybe that's better, right? They've also had success with like the small ball group with Obi Toppin and Siakam with the starters, and they've had success with Jarris in for Aaron Nesmith with the starters, right? Like it's been very interesting. They had success with that Isaiah Jackson group with the starters instead of Myles Turner. That should be another proof positive, by the way, that it is just kind of small sample size stuff that Siakam, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, Nembhard, Haliburton, Nesmith, Jackson was awesome, has been awesome this year, right? Like I don't think Myles Turner has played bad by any means. I don't think his rebounding's been where it needs to be, but like other than that, he's been fine. And yet just switching him out for a different center makes the starters look good. Like, no, it's just kind of small sample-y stuff. But I do think that if you really dive into it, like Mathurin in place of Nembhard with the centers, that has looked pretty good. Also, not as good as the lineup I said earlier, where he's in there for Nesmith. And then Shepherd with in this opening 5 in Nesmith's spot has also looked really good, right? That's what I wanted to say earlier is like, yes, Mathurin with them has looked very good. So has a lot of guys subbed in various different spots for different guys. And so it is interesting to me that I would not just go crazy about, especially like Myles Turner missed a game, right? We've had 4 games of the starters this season, but it's a trend from preseason too that group hasn't been clicking, and other various alignments have worked. And we know this team has a ton of depth. And so something I said before the Celtics game was it feels like and has felt like a lot of times their rotation has been random. And I don't mean, and I didn't, and I still don't mean that critically. Like they're trying lots of different things and figuring stuff out. And if you look at their lineups page this year, you would immediately notice that because the starters have played 68 minutes. The next highest group, which is the starters minus Neesmith plus Mathurin, has played 19 minutes. And that's it for Pacers lineups that have played 10 minutes this season. That's it. Every other group has played less than 10. That's unreal. Like 2 minutes a game for a lineup through 5 games, and they'd hit 10 minutes. That has not happened for any group except for the 2 I just said. So I would pause on any lineup change analysis at this stage, but I do think the numbers have been fascinating that lots of different combos of a different person plugged in with the starting 5 in place of someone else have yielded pretty good results for the Pacers. Like Shepherd in for Nembhard. Pretty good. They defended very well. So I could go down the line. I already have. But a lot of people saying right now there should be a lineup change. Mathurin should be starting now. And my theory is if you think that, and I'm not saying any of you are wrong, to be clear, if you think that, but if you think that now, you also thought that before the season. Because to me, I can't be knocked off. Maybe you can. A lot of people can. I can't be knocked off of a take from like a 4 or 5 games stretch unless something just absurd happens. So Mathurin has clearly been one of the best 3, 4, 2 Pacers this season. And that merits like, hey, maybe this guy should be starting and playing more. I don't think the Pacers will or should get to that until like Thanksgiving-ish, but he's played very well. And a lot of lineups suggests that he has been fitting well with the starters, which matters a great deal for him starting, is him playing well with the starting 5. And I wanted to talk about that mostly because of that. Jimmy's question to me on the radio is very good. And the numbers say, hey, the starting 5 has been bad this year so far. And guess what? It wasn't good in the preseason either, which is enough for me to talk about a trend, even though including preseason, we're talking about 6 games. So both of these things, the 3-point attempt rate and really the rim attempt rate and lineups, nothing alarming. 5 games, bad 5-game stretch, not even bad. The Pacers aren't even playing that bad, but like flimsy 5-game stretches happen all the time in the NBA, all the time. But put a pin in it. Put a pin in it. Let's talk about this stuff in 10 games, really maybe even 5 if things continue to play as they have. And then solutions should be discussed. But right now, I would say if things continue exactly as they have, yes, they should probably think hard about a lineup change a month from now, maybe not even that far. And yes, they need to figure out a way to get their shot diet just a little tweaked, just a little, even though their offense has still been very good. That's where we are. The Pacers play a game tonight. They play the New Orleans Pelicans. And it's Halloween, spooky, and they're playing a skeleton crew. Let's talk a little bit about that game, what to watch for. Can the Pacers get back to 500? We'll close out today's show talking some Pels. Before we dive into the New Orleans basketball team in the NBA, we've got to talk about the good folks over at Gametime, the best way to get tickets to the Comedy Sports Theater, whatever you're going to near you, with all their many awesome features that make it the best way to get tickets because there's no more guesswork. You know exactly what you're getting. When you go to an event, when you use Gametime, you're getting a great deal because they have super deals and curated deals and the Gametime Picks feature that filters out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste your time flipping through 1,000 tickets. They have the seat views, so you see what you're going to see in the venue before you actually get there. Mine experience with it was spot on. They have their lowest price guarantee. They have event cancellation protection and job loss protection. You can toggle off the fees and see the all-in pricing so you know exactly what you're going to pay at the end. It is just the best way to get tickets because it takes the guesswork out of the process. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Pels, Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison. Already talking about Willie Green and the head coaching job for the Pels, who just got swept on a back-to-back in Golden State. No Steph, although the Pelicans are also super banged up. really strange start to the year for New Orleans. DeJounte Murray gets hurt after the first game. They're taking like no threes. They don't have that many shooters, but they're really not taking any threes. And they are, man, they are really banged up. Injury report says Trey Murphy III out. Herb Jones out. DeJounte Murray out. CJ McCollum out. That's a lot of good players. They still have Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. Daniel Tice, ex-Pacer, questionable. Yves Missi, who's been really good, their rookie center, questionable. Jordan Hawkins, one of their best shooters on a team that doesn't shoot very well, questionable. Yikes. They're calling up guys from the G League. And yet, that should mean nothing. We just saw the Pacers lose to the Sixers, right? We just saw it happen on Sunday. A very banged-up Sixers team that shouldn't have had the talent to keep up with the Pacers, and the Pacers were up 8 in the third quarter and up 5 with minutes to go, and they blew that game. And if they won that game, they'd be 3-2 and near the top of the East and feeling good about winning some games, even though they weren't playing that well. Instead, that's not the vibe of the team, and the Sixers can trudge on and smile because they got to win. Like, these games matter. And this, if the Pacers lose to the Pelicans, which it's a road game against a decent team, normally they'd go, okay, whatever. Like last year, they got blasted in New Orleans, right? They couldn't miss for the whole first quarter. But given the current environment of the Pelicans team, it's probably when the Pacers feel like they need to win. And getting back to 500 is always good for the vibes, especially when they have said and felt like they weren't playing particularly well in these early games. It's been a short stretch, and obviously it's the only sample we have to discuss, so it's going to feel negative talking about how the team has played. I'm ranting on this. A win for the Pacers would be very nice, but they have not earned the benefit of the doubt to say that this will be easy in any way, right? They have struggled with banged-up teams all the time. They lost in New Orleans to a crazy first quarter last season. What stands out about the Pels? I already said it. They are taking the weirdest shots. They cannot get threes up. They talked about wanting to get threes up before the season. It's weird. A lot of teams say that and don't actually do it. But this year, even more so weird than other seasons. They sit at 2 and 3. They have really good talent of shot creation, and yet 27th in the NBA in three-point attempts and not high, below average in free throw attempts. That is going to lead to inefficient offense, below average in assists, below average in rebounds. Basically, they steal and block and play good defense and hope that it leads to success so far this year. And yet their defensive rating is still below average. Their offense has really stunk. And some of you will go, well, they're due. Maybe they're due. They do have good talent, but it hasn't looked pretty. And the Pacers need to continue to defend at a capable level. I know that sounds crazy to say, but their defense has actually been okay this season. I said that the defense was the most crucial thing to be against Boston. Their defense was pretty good until the last 8 minutes when the Celtics scored a gazillion points. But like the Pacers were well on their way to holding that team to the mid to low 110s, which was the benchmark I thought was important. And obviously that didn't happen, but the defense was huge for them in that game. Pacers not defending awesome, but they're 22nd in defensive rating, and they're points away from top 20. That's not good. That's good enough for them, given what their offense has been historically, right? Against the Pels, if they can defend not well enough, they should be able to beat that team. Pelicans currently 27th in offensive rating and just a ghastly true shooting percentage number. They cannot be efficient at all. Effective field goal percentage even lower in the rankings because they're doing well at the free throw line, right? They are just not a good offense. If the Pacers can defend them okay, the Pacers should win this game. Their offensive mojo has recovered enough for me to believe that. I can't go as far as saying, yeah, they will. I mean, we learned last year to say that, never say that about this Pacers team, but that is the reality they are facing tonight. In terms of actual basketball stuff, how they defend Zion will be telling to me. 3rd and 4 nights for the Pelicans, and Zion is shooting 36% this season. That is not something that you expect from him. He is this bully who can get inside and create his own shots. His career low field goal percentage is 57. They've got to put pressure on him and force him to kind of not, continue to be at this level of finisher, right? Especially inside the arc. As good as he is, if he gets rolling and can be a bowling ball and be an offensive weapon, he's impossible to slow down, right? I mean, we all saw that insane playing game he had last year. This year he's taking way less shots right at the basket and way more from like floater range. I think the Pacers need to continue to try to force him out. So whoever's on him, I would guess it's going to be Myles Turner, assuming Myles Turner plays, has got to try to use some force, use some physicality to force him away from the basket, keep him away from the rim. Do not let him get rolling in there. And then Brandon Ingram, too, their other mega offensive talent. Usually he has, unlike Zion, started this season pretty efficiently, over 50% from the field, shooting very well from deep, right? Whoever's on him, I'd imagine that is Nesmith or Siakam to start the game. If they can keep him from getting rolling in any sort of way, That would also go a long way. And I know that seems obvious to talk about the stars, but on a banged-up team missing Murray and McCollum, that's pretty much it in terms of guys who can reliably create shots on the Pelicans right now. It's those two guys. Right, they've been playing like Javonte Green, Zion Williamson, Daniel Tice front courts. Like their shooting and spacing isn't very good. Creating good shots is very hard with this current iteration of the Pelicans, and that is why slowing the stars will be everything. If either one of them does not have an awesome or pretty good game for the Pelicans, the Pacers should be in this. They should have a chance. And so I know it's very boring analysis to say slow the stars and you'll win, but in this unique Pelicans circumstance, that is absolutely the case. So whoever is guarding those two guys are my key guys. And look, the Pelicans defense has been okay. If Haliburton gets rolling, if he can get the offense rolling, not even him necessarily, like if he can just keep getting 10 to 12 assists and make the offense look like last year's offense, the Pacers will be able to score. They have been for these last two games when he has done that. I don't think people have given enough credit to the way the Pacers looked in Orlando despite losing. Their offense looks more like their offense. If they continue to do that and slow down one, if not both of the Pel Stars, they'll put themselves in a good position to win. We'll break it all down tomorrow. I've decided I'm going to do weekend pods if the Pacers play on weekend days and just record right after. So we'll be talking Pelicans Pacers tomorrow night right here on this channel. I will hopefully be wearing normal, not silly attire. Hope you guys enjoyed this show and can laugh at me looking like Bugs Bunny for over half an hour. Tomorrow, like I said, talking Pacers Pels. Then next weekend, we'll run into a new week with the Mavs, with the Magic, with the Hornets, a chance for the Pacers to get some wins. And we'll talk about it all here on Locked On Pacers. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you had a great week. We will see you very soon.